Book 10, Chapter 36. And thou knowest how far thou hast already changed me, who first healedst me of the lust of vindicating myself, so that thou might forgive all the rest of my iniquities, and heal all my infirmities, and redeem my life from corruption, and crown me with mercy and pity, and satisfy my desire with good things. Who didst curb my pride with thy fear, and tame my neck to thy yoke. And now I bear it, and it is light unto me, because so hast thou promised, and hast made it. And verily so it was, and I knew it not, when I feared to take it. But, O Lord, thou alone Lord without pride, because thou art the only true Lord, who hast no Lord, hath this third kind of temptation also ceased from me, or can it cease through this whole life? To wish, namely, to be feared and loved of men, for no other end, but that we may have a joy therein which is no joy. A miserable life this, and a foul boastfulness. Hence especially it comes, that men do neither purely love, nor fear thee. And therefore dost thou resist the proud, and give grace to the humble. Yea, thou thunderest down upon the ambitions of the world, and the foundations of the mountains tremble. Because now certain offices of human society make it necessary to be loved and feared of men, the adversary of our true blessedness layeth hard at us, everywhere spreading his snares of well done, that greedily catching at them, we may be taken unawares, and sever our joy from thy truth, and set it in the deceivingness of man, and be pleased at being loved and feared, not for thy sake, but in thy stead. And thus having been made like him, we may have them for his own, not in the bands of charity, but out of the bonds of punishment, who proposed to set his throne in the north, that dark and chilled they might serve him, pervertedly and crookedly imitating thee. But we, O Lord, behold we are thy little flock. Possess us as thine, stretch thy wings over us, and let us fly under them. Be thou our glory, let us be loved for thee, and thy word feared in us. Who would be praised of men, when thou blamest, will not be defended of men, when thou judgest, nor delivered, when thou condemnest. But when, not the sinner is praised in the desires of his soul, nor he blessed, who doth ungodly, but a man is praised for some gift which thou hast given him, and he rejoices more at the praise for himself, than that he hath the gift for which he is praised, he is also praised, while thou dispraiseth. And better is he who praised than he who is praised. For the one took pleasure in the gift of God in man, the other was better pleased with the gift of man than of God. Chapter 37. By these temptations we are assailed daily, O Lord. Without ceasing we are assailed. Our daily furnace is the tongue of men, and in this way also thou commandest us continence. Give what thou enjoinest, and enjoin what thou wilt. Thou knowest on this matter the groans of my heart, and the floods of mine eyes. For I cannot learn how far I am more cleansed from this plague, and I much fear my secret sins, which thine eyes know, mine do not. For in other kinds of temptations I have some sort of means of examining myself, in this scarcely any. For, in refraining my mind from the pleasures of the flesh and idle curiosity, I see how much I have attained to when I do without them, foregoing or not having them. For then I ask myself how much more or less troublesome it is to me not to have them. Then riches, which are desired, that they may serve to some one or two, or all of the three, concupiscences, if the soul cannot discern, whether, when it hath them, it despiseth them, they may be cast aside, so that it may prove itself. But to be without praise, and therein say our powers, we must live ill. Yea, so abandonedly and atrociously that no one should know without detesting us. What greater madness can be said or thought of? But if praise useth, and ought to accompany a good life and good works, we ought as little to forego its company as good life itself. Yet I know not, whether I can well or ill be without anything, unless it be absent. What then do I confess unto Thee in this kind of temptation, O Lord? What, but that I am delighted with praise, but with truth itself, more than with praise? For were it proposed to me, whether I would, being frenzied in error on all things, be praised by all men, or being consistent and settled in the truth, be blamed by all, I see which I should choose. Yet fain would I, that the approbation of another should not even increase my joy for any good in me. Yet I own, it doth increase it, and not only so, but dispraise both diminish it. And when I am troubled at this my misery, an excuse occurs to me, which of what value it is, Thou, God, knowest, for it leaves me uncertain. For since Thou hast commanded us not to continency alone, that is, from what things to refrain our love, but righteousness also, that is, wherein to bestow it, and hast willed us to love not Thee only, but our neighbor also, often, when pleased with intelligent praise, I seem to myself to be pleased with the proficiency or towardliness of my neighbor, or to be grieved for evil in him, when I hear him dispraise either what he understands not, or is good. For sometimes I am grieved at my own praise, either when those things be praised in me, in which I mislike myself, or even lesser and slight goods are more esteemed than they ought. But again, how know I, whether I am therefore thus affected, because I would not have him who praiseth me differ from me about myself? Not as being influenced by concern for him, but because those some good things which please me in myself, please me more when they please another also. For somehow I am not praised when my judgment of myself is not praised, forasmuch as either those things are praised which displease me, or those more which please me less. Am I then doubtful of myself in this matter? Behold, in Thee, O Truth, I see, that I ought not to be moved at my own praises, for my own sake, but for the good of my neighbor. And whether it be so with me, I know not. For herein I know less of myself than of Thee. I beseech now, O my God, discover to me myself also, that I may confess unto my brethren, who are to pray for me, wherein I find myself maimed. Let me examine myself again more diligently. If in my praise I am moved with the good of my neighbor, why am I less moved if another be unjustly dispraised, than if it be myself? Why am I more stung by reproach cast upon myself, than at that cast upon another, with the same injustice, before me? Know I not this also? Or is it at last that I deceive myself, and do not the truth before Thee in my heart and tongue? This madness put far from me, O Lord, lest mine own mouth be to me the sinner's oil, to make fat my head. I am poor and needy, yet best, while hidden in groanings I displease myself, and seek Thy mercy, until what is lacking in my defective state be renewed and perfected, on to that peace which the eye of the proud knoweth not. Chapter 38. Yea, the word, which cometh out of the mouth, and deeds known to men, bring with them a most dangerous temptation through the love of praise, which, to establish a certain excellency of our own, solicits and collects men's suffrages. It tempts, even when it is reproved by myself in myself, on the very ground that it is reproved, and often glories more vainly of the very contempt of vainglory. And so it is no longer contempt of vainglory, whereof it glories, for it doth not contemn when it glorifieth. Chapter 39. Within is another evil, arising out of a like temptation, whereby men become vain, pleasing themselves in themselves, though they please not, or displease, or care not to please others. But pleasing themselves, they much displease Thee, not only taking pleasure in things not good, as if good, but in Thy good things, as though their own, or even if as Thine, yet as though for their own merits. or even if as though from thy grace, yet not with brotherly rejoicing, but envying that grace to others. In all these and the like perils and travails, thou seest the trembling of my heart, and I rather feel my wounds to be cured by thee, than not inflicted by me. Chapter 40. Where hast thou not walked with me, O truth, teaching me what to beware, and what to desire, when I referred to thee that I could discover here below, and consulted thee? With my outward senses, as I might, I surveyed the world, and surveyed the life which my body hath from me, and these my senses. Thence entered I the recesses of my memory, those manifold and spacious chambers, wonderfully furnished with innumerable stores, and I considered and stood aghast, being able to discern nothing of these things without thee, and finding none of them to be thee. Nor was I myself, who found out these things, who went over them all, and labored to distinguish and value everything according to its dignity, taking some things upon the report of my senses, questioning about others which I felt to be mingled with myself, numbering and distinguishing the reporters themselves, and in the large treasure house of my memory revolving some things, storing up others, drawing out others. Nor yet was I myself when I did this, i.e., that my power whereby I did it, neither was it thou, for thou art the abiding light, which I consulted concerning all these, whether they were, what they were, and how to be valued. And I heard thee directing and commanding me, and this I often do, this delights me, and as far as I may be freed from necessary duties, unto this pleasure have I recourse. Nor in all these which I run over consulting thee can I find any safe place for my soul, but in thee, whither my scattered members may be gathered, and nothing of me depart from thee. And sometimes thou admittest me into an affection, very unusual, in my inmost soul, rising to a strange sweetness, which if it were perfected in me, I know not what in it would not belong to the life to come. But through my miserable encumbrances I sink down again into these lower things, and am swept back by former custom, and am held and greatly weep, but am greatly held. So much doth the burden of a bad custom weigh us down. Here I can stay, but would not. There I would, but cannot. Both ways miserable. Chapter 41. Thus have I considered the sicknesses of my sins in that threefold concupiscence, and have called thy right hand to my help. For with a wounded heart have I beheld thy brightness, and stricken back I said, who can attain thither? I am cast away from the sight of thine eyes. Thou art the truth who presideth over all, but I through my covetousness would not indeed forego thee, but would with thee possess a lie, as no man in such wise speak falsely, as himself to be ignorant of the truth. So then I lost thee, because thou vouchsafest not to be possessed with a lie. Chapter 42. Whom could I find to reconcile me to thee? Was I to have recourse to angels? By what prayers? By what sacraments? Many endeavouring to return unto thee, and of themselves unable, have, as I hear, tried this, and fallen into the desire of curious visions, and been accounted worthy to be deluded. For they, being high-minded, sought thee by the pride of learning, swelling out rather than smiting upon their breasts, and so by the agreement of their heart drew unto themselves the princes of the air, the fellow conspirators of their pride, by whom, through magical influences they were deceived, seeking a mediator, by whom they might be purged, and there was none. For the devil it was, transforming himself into an angel of light, and it much enticed proud flesh, that he had no body of flesh. For they were mortal and sinners, but thou, Lord, to whom they proudly sought to be reconciled, art immortal, and without sin. But a mediator between God and man must have something like to God, something like to men, lest being in both like man, he should be far from God, or if in both like God, too far from man, and so not be a mediator. That deceitful mediator then, by whom in thy secret judgments pride deserved to be deluded, hath one thing in common with man, that is sin. Another he would seem to have in common with God, and not being clothed with the mortality of flesh, would vaunt himself to be immortal. But since the wages of sin is death, this hath he in common with men, whereby with them he should be condemned to death. Chapter 43. But the true mediator, whom in thy secret mercy thou hast showed to the humble, and sentest, that by his example also they might learn that same humility, that mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus, appeared betwixt mortal sinners and the immortal just one, mortal with men, just with God, that because the wages of righteousness is life and peace, he might, by a righteousness conjoined with God, make void that death of sinners, now made righteous, which he willed to have in common with them. Hence he was showed forth to holy men of old, that so they, through faith in his passion to come, as we through faith of it past, might be saved. For as man he was a mediator, but as the Word, not in the middle between God and man, because equal to God, and God with God, and together one God. How hast thou loved us, good Father, who sparedst not thine own Son, but deliveredst him up for us ungodly? How hast thou loved us, for whom he that thought it no robbery to be equal with thee was made subject even to the death of the cross, he alone free among the dead, having power to lay down his life and power to take it again. For us, to thee both victor and victim, and therefore victor, because the victim. For us to thee priest and sacrifice, and therefore priest, because the sacrifice, making us to thee of servants, sons, being born of thee, and serving us. Well then is my hope strong in him, that thou wilt heal all my infirmities, by him who sitteth at thy right hand and maketh intercession for us, else should I despair. For many and great are my infirmities, many they are and great, but thy medicine is mightier. We might imagine that thy word was far from any union with man, and despair of ourselves, unless he had been made flesh and dwelt among us. Affrighted with my sins and the burden of my misery, I had cast in my heart, and had purposed to flee to the wilderness. But thou forbadest me, and strengthenest me, saying, Therefore Christ died for all, that they which live may now no longer live unto themselves, but unto him that died for them. See, Lord, I cast my care upon thee, that I may live, and consider wondrous things out of thy law. Thou knowest my unskilfulness and my infirmities. Teach me and heal me. He thine own Son, in whom are hid all the treasures of wisdom and knowledge, hath redeemed me with his blood. Let not the proud speak evil of me, because I meditate on my ransom, and eat and drink, and communicate it, and poor, desired to be satisfied from him, amongst those that eat and are satisfied, and they shall praise the Lord who seek him. End of Book 10.